I saw it as I was shaking the snow off the carpet, the family photo hanging in the center of the fireplace, shiny like a poster for happiness. Mom, in a red blazer, smiling, practiced in the mirror. Dad keeping his face stiff for golf shots. My sister, standing in a beige turtleneck that probably cost me a month's rent, tilting her head in her favorite natural angle. The lighting was perfect, the frame expensive, everyone had a place. Except me. Not an accidental smudge. My part was gone, as if someone had run a carving knife through the paper and lifted me out of the story. I looked up for exactly 4 seconds, 5 at most, enough for my gut to knot and straighten itself before anyone noticed. "Dinner's almost ready." Mom called from the kitchen, her voice soft, as if everything were okay, as if we were that picture on the wall. The scent of rosemary and lemon drifted out sweet with the kind of memory that used to feel warm. My sister was swirling her wine glass around like she was filming a TV pairing. She leaned in, blowing a kiss into the air. "You're here." I smiled the smile you learn after screaming into a pillow 3 times in a month and deciding you need to save your voice. Dinner ran according to script. Dad cut the meat slowly, as if there was a director behind the camera. Mom complimented my glowing skin twice. No one asked where I lived, what I was doing, how I was doing. The only question thrown my way was, "Do you still have that little car, a code word for people who don't know you, but still want to seem friendly?" My sister opened a gift from her parents, a vintage gold watch. "Oh my gosh," she breathed in a practiced voice. Dad smiled as if he'd just sealed a deal. "No big deal," Mom said, as the bill folded in 4 was tucked under the thin paper. I accepted a ceramic mug with the words, "Somebody's favorite daughter." Maybe it was a joke, maybe it wasn't. It was hard to tell. After dessert, Mom said, "Stay in the living room. Not your room, just the living room." The sheets were faded, the bookshelf dusty, the table lamp flickering as if struggling to breathe. I sat down and pulled a thick ivory-papered envelope from my purse stamped with an embossed seal. I'd planned to deliver it tomorrow after the waffles, the wool socks, and the annual Everyone Loves Each Other So Much show. But the photo had been rescheduled. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd erased me neatly, deliberately, like removing a shareholder from a presentation slide before a fundraising call. I set the envelope on my lap, listening to the house quiet down the creaking floorboards, the ticking clock, Dad's deep snores. Mom's voice in the hallway talking about a good set of CDs for tomorrow. My sister's laughter from practice. Memories lined up like chess pieces the day I got into my dream school. They said so proud and then immediately asked, "Can you postpone a year so she can work on her portfolio?" When I was short on rent, Dad said he was stuck while booking a birthday cruise for her. The time I brought my boyfriend home, they forgot his name at dinner. My 8th birthday ended early because of a recital. My state science award got a nice job text. I blamed myself for it. Maybe I was too quiet, too unlovable, should have been more subdued, more beige. Then one seemingly ordinary morning, I went to the records office to get my employment records verified. And among a list of indifferent names, my name appeared attached to a house in Old Briar right by the park with the rusty swing. "It's probably a duplicate," I muttered, but then curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the strings, asked for copies of the records, ran a title search, checked taxes, dug through old emails, sent a few letters of inquiry, and had a patient lawyer piece the pieces together. The picture came to life. My grandfather's will, the real thing, named me the sole beneficiary of the rental property. The paperwork, the timeline, and the cash flow told the rest. They didn't just erase me from the picture. I whispered to the flickering desk lamp they used my name to make their own peace of mind. That night, I hugged the envelope like a warm stone and fell asleep. I dreamed that I walked straight into the frame without asking anyone's permission. When I woke up, I knew I would do it in the morning, right there, on the reclaimed wood table that my mother cherished in front of the people who had edited my life without even mentioning me by name. I would hand over the envelope, say Merry Christmas, and let the truth do the work that years of silence had failed to do. The next morning, the scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls was sweet enough to mask the rustling below. I lingered in the living room longer than I should have, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to enter a stage where everyone knew their lines. When I went into the kitchen, Mom was decorating a plate of eggs like it was for a magazine shoot. Dad was scrolling through his phone. My sister was drinking almond milk from a wine glass. "Can you sleep?" Dad asked without looking up. "Enough," I said. Everyone moved into the living room, the Christmas tree twinkling, wrapping paper the only permitted clutter. My sister tugged at the handle of her new bag like she was holding a newborn. I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket and quietly placed it in the middle of the table between the torn paper and the coffee cup. No one noticed. 10 minutes later, Mom noticed, not because she thought it was mine, but because there was an unapproved foreign object on her beloved recycled table. "What is this?" she asked vaguely. "It's yours," I said, picking up my cup and sipping. "Open it now," Mom asked, tilting her head. "I want you to wait," I said. So, of course they did. The blade of the knife slid through the wax. The paper opened a rustling sound like someone pulling a rug off the floor. Dad leaned in. Mom's eyes darted through the pages, flipping pages 2 and 3 as if the speed could beat the content. My sister was still stroking the strap of the bag until the air changed color. She looked up. "What's going on?" No one answered. "It's a copy of your will," I said calmly. Mom blinked. "I saw it. I finished the estate. I finished what I said was the estate, I said. The full version is different. It has the house in Old Briar transferred to me. And you and I were already collecting the rent." Dad put the paper down as if burned. "Where did you get it?" he growled. "Public records, title checks, taxes, a few phone calls, a patient lawyer," I said. My sister poked her head over my mother's shoulder. "What house?" I looked at her. "The one by the park, where you did your Autumn Beginnings shoot last year." Her mouth opened and closed like a door being blown open by a gust of wind. My mother took a breath, her tone softening as she returned an empty package. "It's not what you think. We just want the best for everyone." "What good would it be to cut someone's name off the paperwork?" I asked. "It says it all in black and white. You own the house. All the rent you've paid for is yours. Any renovations you've made are without your permission." My father rubbed his temples. "Don't be so dramatic," I laughed. "You're being dramatic. You cut my face out of the family photos and used my name to legitimize your benefits, and I'm the one who's doing the acting." My sister blushed. "The rent paid for my tuition, and the car, and the trip to Mexico, and a few bags," I said. "I never needed it," she snapped. "You've always been independent." "Because you were told there was nothing more to ask," I said. "And I know that." Mom put her hand on the paper, her voice shaking. "I don't like responsibility. I'm far away. I'm far away because being close is unwelcome," I said. Dad stood up. "Calm down." I looked at him. "You need a lawyer. I haven't sued, not yet, but I've filed for reinstatement. The tenants have been notified. The rent is on me now. Mom and Dad don't have the keys." Mom paled. "That house is our income. Mom and Dad depend on it." "Then don't steal it," I said quietly. "We're family," Mom whispered. "No," I said, "everyone is someone I used to be related to. It's a big difference." My sister's hand tightened on the strap of her bag. "You think that's winning, no?" I said, not standing any lower. Dad gritted his teeth. "If you walk out the door today, don't come back." I put on my coat, put my hand on the doorknob, and turned my head one last time. That was probably the first thing we agreed on. Outside, the air was cold and clean, a reminder that I still had lungs to breathe. I drove away, not crying, not laughing. I just breathed. Sometimes the loudest voice was my footsteps walking away. 3 weeks of silence. Then the first text message. Mom wrote like a press release. I think there's a misunderstanding. Can we talk? Hope you're okay. Love you. The love you floated around like a coat hung on the wrong hook. I didn't reply. 2 days later. Don't let this one thing ruin it all. Your brother is very upset. Your dad is surprised you know how dads are. Oh, I know. Surprised when the consequences hit him, not when he chose to do the wrong thing. I deleted Dad's voicemail. The last time he called me kiddo was when he said, "Leave the money to someone who understands, okay, not me." My sister's email came later blaring with the words, "You think you're winning, take the house. Money can't buy a family." The next day she added, "Mom and Dad are stressed. We might have to sell the apartment." Happy yet I read it twice, not out of guilt, but to understand how many strings were tied to the house. I changed the locks, worked with contractors to fix the flaking, took a few before and after photos to prove to myself that honesty is sometimes unflattering, but lasting. I met the tenants, a nurse, a new teacher, a retired mechanic who paid on time and were called lucky. I fixed a window, lowered the rent for a family by $50. They left a handwritten note. Thank you for treating us like human beings. I taped it to the kitchen cabinet where the sugar was. Meanwhile, news of the old house trickled through the neighborhood. The failed remortgage. Dad's advice meant calling old clients in a voice 10 years younger. Mom worked weekends at a boutique where she used to buy her workout clothes. My sister moved back home because her city apartment was too expensive for an empty client list. She started a GoFundMe for her creative new chapter, raising $83. 2 of them were from my ex. I laughed, then stopped feeling guilty for laughing. I hadn't counted the old rent, though it followed me like a shadow. I let it rest the way one lets anger cool, so as not to burn oneself. Spring came, and old Briar's backyard opened its eyes, sprouting like at last seen. I learned where water collects after rain, how the afternoon light falling on the steps turns dust to gold. The phone stopped being a life preserver seeking an apology. Sleep stopped breaking in the middle of the night. I built shelves out of cheap pine, put potted plants on the windowsill, things that lived on light and didn't ask for much. Then a letter arrived, the cover smelling of old perfume in my mother's handwriting. I held it for a long time to warm it before opening it. Inside were carefully punctuated sentences. We didn't know. We didn't mean to. We just wanted the best. And the sentence I remember most. You've always been so strong that we didn't think you needed it. The person who benefits from your endurance always calls it a strength. At the end of the letter, I hope you come home one day. Maybe we can do it again. There was no sorry, no reimbursement, no mention of the photo he cut out of me. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Didn't reply. Didn't burn it. Let it lie there like a faded photograph, unworthy of a frame, but needing no fire. One afternoon, my old neighbor stood on the steps, handing me a bag of late-season tomatoes. I heard your parents are having a hard time, she said softly. I was silent. She nodded. You look happy. That's good. I was happy, not because someone else had failed, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't a supporting role called in at the last minute. As the calls faded, life began to take on a new quality. I repainted the steps and sat waiting for them to dry like a clock, watching the seasons change. I learned how rain on this roof sounded different from the old one. I replaced an outlet myself without calling a plumber, then laughed to myself in the kitchen like I had won a medal. Work slowed down and then grew steadily, then blossomed in a way that didn't swallow me up. I remembered the tenant's birthday, and left a small bouquet of flowers on the steps for the night nurse. The house taught me to believe in slow repair, letting the putty dry, cutting the seams, neatly sanding between coats, and believing that the surface could be smoother than it was when I started. It turned out that I didn't need distance to stop missing my family. I needed space. When the sadness came, as it inevitably did, the loss of the illusion of a mother who was always in pain, even though she had never actually raised me, it didn't come crashing down like a storm, but rose like a wave far from shore. I stood and watched, letting it rise, not sinking, not running. It retreated. That's the trick of the waves, the same water I drink every day. The old green armchair I kept stood under the front window where the afternoon sun always painted a bright frame on the floor. Sitting there, I saw the park and the rusty swing. Once, a group of photographers stopped by. A girl in a beige turtleneck smiled at the imaginary sun. For a moment, I thought of my sister and how the house had been the backdrop to her story. Then I remembered the girl was a stranger, and this house was mine. I don't know when my parents realized how widespread the loss of that cash flow would be, but I know when I stopped imagining their conversation the day I tucked the yearly tax into the file and zipped it shut. Justice doesn't always clang like a courthouse door. Sometimes it closes like a smooth drawer. A year later, I pulled out my mother's letter and read it again. Still no sorry. There were many, don't you know. It was the cousin of the apology borrowing something and not returning it. I wrote a note pinned to the book on my desk. If we ever have another conversation, it won't be about anything old. It will require real expensive words. Without them, silence is the politest option. I taped another note to the refrigerator. I'm not angry anymore. Anger was a match lit useful, then extinguished. I used it to see the room. The rest I did with daylight. Late summer, the tenant came in to show off her bag of bright red tomatoes, and we stood on the steps talking about dogs' buses and how time was both a thief and a seamstress. She said she'd lived here for 12 years, and no one had ever asked her what color she wanted the kitchen painted. I chose a warm color to welcome the north light, she said. We chose a delicate peach. When the paint dried, the room breathed easier. One evening, I put the frame on the mantelpiece. I stood on the steps, the key in my hand. No one else in the frame. No one to crop. The photo is not an altar, just a paid bill I chose myself, and the transaction went through. Years later, I ran into my old neighbor in the bookstore. Is the housekeeper still at the old Briar? She asked. Yes, I smiled the smile that came from sleepless nights. She paused for a beat and said, I hear your parents are going through a rough patch. I said nothing. She nodded. You look happy. That's good. I was happy not because the past had been washed away with a perfect apology, but because the future I wrote didn't need it. Occasionally, through my cousins, I still received Christmas cards that simply said, thinking of you. Hope you're well. No return address. I didn't write back. In the winter, I hung a simple wreath and baked cinnamon rolls to my own recipe. A recipe that became mine only because I'd been at it long enough to change it. If people ask what the lesson is, I tell them what I told myself in the green armchair. Love doesn't ask you to take a test, and respect isn't a reward at the finish line. Walking isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's the only way to get where you belong. And silence isn't weakness. It can be a tool, a strategy to save your voice for the right phrase to change the room. If you need a practical one, ask for papers with your name on them and read the act, not the caption. If you need a soft one, you're allowed to set the table yourself and light a candle without an audience. One late winter afternoon, the sky pale, the park still streaked with hard snow. I passed a gallery window and saw a family photo by the fireplace, everyone smiling in a prearranged way. I wondered if the photographer had kept the original file, where the corner of my hair or my shoulder was still imprinted unerased. Then I smiled. The important version is the one I live. I stand in the frame of my life on the freshly painted steps, the key in my hand, opening the door I chose. I don't wait for those who couldn't say sorry to figure out how to say it without paying the price. I'm not afraid of being alone, because alone isn't an accusation. It's an address, and mine has windows full of trees. I think of my mother's letter, still sleeping in her drawer, and imagine an alternate universe where she wrote those precious, heartfelt words. Maybe that letter exists somewhere. Here I have a certificate, a garden neighbor's, and a morning that began with sunlight coffee and the squeak of a swing down the street. My life is closed like a well-run drawer, nothing stuck. The last lesson I keep for myself, and if you need it, I'm ready to lend you a hand. Don't wait for someone to put you back in their frame. Build your own frame and stand in it fully. If this story touches you, please, like it so. It can reach more people. Share it with someone who needs a word of courage. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other healing stories, and comment on the moment that makes you the strongest. Who knows, your words might be the key for someone else.